This is Charles,
This is Emanuel.
and you are listening to
Blight makes right.
the original Legion of Everblight podcast.
Podcast.
All right, so this episode we are gonna do kind of a little bit of a battle report, tournament recap, but we're gonna also kind of talk about Animag and Thagrosh and some of these key list elements. So I just did a tournament literally earlier today. It was a 3 round, and I was, to be totally honest, last night I'm like, I have not slept particularly well for like a week. I kind of just want to sleep in. But eventually I was like, well, I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to play two casters I have not played in a tournament before.
Okay.
And I decided to do Thagrosh 2 and Animag, and I pre-decided before going in I was going to play both of them. One way or another, I was going to play both of them, put both of them on the table.
Okay.
Just because, as kind of a follow-up to our last episode, I want to make sure that I am exploring the faction and putting things on the table and seeing how I feel about them. Um, because there's a lot to explore. And I, to a certain extent, you can only talk about things so much. As much as it is important for us to talk about the stuff, there's certain questions that can only be answered when you put them on the table. I think you can probably agree with me there.
Definitely.
Well, let's start with my Animag list, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. So we mentioned that I realized that I could just totally stick my Veil 1 list on Animag, and obviously how the list is going to play is going to be different because the casters are different, but I thought Animag would be potentially a bit more survivable. Um, and then also it would bring additional anti-healing tech to the list with her feet. And the Rot Wings would be performing at a much higher level as well. So I was like, okay. I also liked that she would bring an armor buff to the list. So it's Animag, Golab, Harrier, Seraph, Amok, Feral Geist, Double Spell Martyr, double Max Rot Wings, 2 Max Chosen, 2 Hellmouths. So is there anything immediate about the Animag list that you either like or don't like? I mean, obviously, I wanted to keep up. I would like the 4 units to utilize her feet, but I wanted to have a diverse enough battle group that I could play into some of the battle group scenarios, and I didn't want to be too shy on solos.
Well, I mean, it's very balanced. I kind of had a similar experiment recently. I didn't run the double Rot Wings, which I think is a really interesting option with her. But I did drop the Blightbringer for Golab, and Golab and the Rot Wings performed amazingly that game for me. I was like, man, they just kill the world. And having the extra defense buff mattered for her. I liked it. But I feel like playing her without the Blightbringer is a mistake. What she does and what the Blightbringer does go together like PB and J. And as much as I like the Rot Wings, I think that they tilt her one direction. So her running a bunch of Ogren tends to tilt more on the attrition side, where you hit your opponent hard and you last long. Her with the Rot Wing side is hit your opponent and kill them. When you hit, you kill the world, and if you don't kill the world, a lot of your army is going to fold after that. And I really like the Seraph with Golab. I think that's a really interesting choice, especially in this list, because not only does he have the Swarm to help protect him and be even more and weirder, better situations, but it also allows him to have a target that gets marked beforehand, where you can like go up and flare his target, drop its defense, drag him forward, then have him go murder something. It's a very complete package, and so I like that together in this list. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, you're basically straight up. I mean, Seraph and Golab is 31 points. You're like, it's basically a straight comparison of what these two do as a package for the list compared to the Blightbringer.
Yeah.
Okay, so Thagrosh 2.
Mm-hmm.
I built a few different versions. This, I will admit, had a little bit more to do with playing into, to a certain extent, some variations of Grimkin, and specifically some of the more melee-heavy Menoth Harbinger sort of things,
Mm-hmm.
where the anti-healing is again going to be very important. And it was one of the things that had me thinking, like, maybe I should explore playing Scythians again. I have not put them on a table in a long time. So I decided to go ahead and roll with GoLab Double Scythian Seraph. So that in itself feels very Mark II to me, except GoLab didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Amek, Hermit Double Forsaken, Warmonger War Chief, who is free, Chosen, and then Double Hellmouth.
Mm.
Originally, the War Chief was a free Amek instead, and the Chosen were two Nerfs. But I decided against that because I was comparing the War Chief, basically those 4 points being the War Chief and then the Chosen. Like, it's not that many less boxes when you compare two Nerfs to 5 Chosen models and the War Chief that are all 8 boxes. You basically
Mm-hmm.
have, you're only shy 6 boxes, and that's assuming the Chosen never heal,
Hmm.
right? Like, and so, but I thought it gives the list an additional unit, and I thought it provides some really interesting things with Thagrosh being able to put Dragon's Blood on them so that they're armor 19
Mm-hmm.
would provide some interesting things. And like, there's cool things you could do, like putting Chosen in front of the beast to like block LOS to early gunshots and things where they're going to have to try to pick off a Chosen before
Mm-hmm.
you can start softening up a beast, that sort of thing. But really, what I wanted to do was kill certain things, scalpel out certain things, and then let Thagrosh do work.
I like it.
Huh. So do you have any immediate thoughts, dislikes, or likes about
Yeah.
the Thagrosh list?
Definitely. So up front, I really, 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 really like the Hermit in this list.
Yes.
Um, I think that the Hermit with the X2 just makes so much sense. And as soon as I saw it when you posted the list earlier today, I had to go and take a deep consideration about why I haven't been thinking about the X2 with the Hermit. I like the list overall. I think it's an interesting pair for Animag as well. It does something very different. It plays into the beast scenarios, which she really likes. But I think in a lot of ways, and I was thinking about this earlier today, and then when you were proposing doing this cast, I was like, yeah, I definitely want to talk about this. I think that Thags 2 could potentially be an interesting pair for Animag, and that is, and something that you and I had talked about a bit with Vale is that she can feat and just throw her army really far forward against ranged armies. And Thags can do the same, where he's just like, okay, I need to tie this guy up. I need to cross a lot of ground to do it. I'm going to feat and just zoom across the table.
Yep.
And he gets an attack at the end of it, too. So he's also really hardy and hard to kill, and I think you want a tanky caster against the gun line so they can't just snipe your caster to death. And Thags, he can take a shot. He can take a couple shots, and then he can like sack pawn off to shredders and stuff. So um, I think that the double Scythian is also a really interesting choice. So you have Golab and double Scythian for your anti-healing tech. And they have Murderous. I found the one
Yeah.
thing that Animag doesn't necessarily want to play into is a whole bunch of troops. Because she tends to want to just brick break and beat down. And so this list goes, okay, my two Scythians will just murder a unit by themselves. Just fine. So the whole rest of the list can just tank whatever else you brought. And I the Chosen are the one thing I think are also really a sleeper in this list because you need something that is going to block line of sight to Thags that also doesn't necessarily need to be out there doing work immediately. And the Chosen are great for that because they can walk in front of Thags, be big bases, block line of sight, hard to kill, hyper regen. You can get them up to arm 19, and then after your beasts have chewed through your opponent, they have to deal with Thags and the Chosen. And I also think they're really interesting because if you put them in front of Thags and then they charge in and soften up a target, Thags can come in and do the final blow with his big reach weapon and still be hiding behind the Chosen. So I think they're a great package together.
Yeah, I mean, those were all thoughts going into this. So the Scythians were the big question, and also like, was I going to feel like Chosen were going to do enough work without some sort of real support package for them in the way that like Vale or Callus supports them, which has been majority of my games.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so anyway, I don't I didn't necessarily feel going into this like, oh, this is a perfect pairing or anything like that. I was just kind of like, I wanted two lists that do different things, but potentially have answers into current meta issues. And then I just wanted to play them and just see how I felt about them. Round one, I get Crucible Guard.
Yeah.
My very first final Crucible Guard. And I looked down and I saw Silvestro and Locke. And instead of asking the person, I'm like, I could ask you if you've already figured out what you're going to play, but you're playing the Silvestro faction. So
Yep.
I'm pretty confident I know what you're playing. The big question was, what did I want to play into Silvestro? And as much as I knew the sprays and stuff were going to be able to like murder tons of birds and such, I felt like I still wanted Animag because I was going to be like, part of it was is I needed to chew up time, and I didn't feel like Thagrosh had enough stuff that was going to be on the table to appropriately chew up that much gunfire. Like I felt like my Thagrosh list was just going to be particularly have a rough time into guns, and so I thought Animag was going to be my best option there. So that is what I dropped. It was my first game, so surprisingly, like my memory of this is not perfect. But what started happening pretty early on, I did win despite them having a reroll. I won the roll to go first. I think they started off rolling a 1 and I rolled a 4. And they're like, I re-roll, and they got a 3. I'm like, I guess I still win. And I was like, you know what? This is going to be super weird because I always choose to go second. But I'm going to choose to go first with a list that I've never played against a faction I've never played against. There's going to be a lot of learning. But my last game that I played, I felt like I played particularly poorly going first. And so I really wanted to be prepared to do that differently and keep my stuff in separate packages that weren't quite so intermingled, and be able to better position on the table. Also, because I was going to get to go first, I'd have the option to like run some Chosen potentially in front of Hellmouse if I wanted to keep them. But anyway, I felt like I unpacked quickly with the list because at least I'd played the list with Veil, and I was able to like move up pretty aggressively, but not give them too many shots. And in the end, I ended up being pretty happy with how things were going. Because whenever someone's asked me like, how do you play into guns? And I'm like, people clock trying to shoot 20 birds and 10 Chosen off the table.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, that is what happened in this game. My opponent just ended up running low on time, and I was keeping the pressure on the scenario. And the way the game ended, I was at 6 control points and they were at 4 when they eventually clocked. And mind you, I mean, they did kill a lot of stuff. Those railless interceptors are dicks.
Yeah, they're fucking amazing.
They get a ton of work done. But I just kept, Golab is this like little missile that just takes out key things and gets back to safety. And we had the big thing that saved me was the terrain. There was kind of these 3 small forests. You couldn't hide much behind there, but like I would always try to keep Golab behind one of them to like threaten things, and it kept Silvestro reasonably far back because they had to respect Golab, and it kept Golab relatively safe from the guns. But they just ate up so much time trying to take down the army and just get things off the table that I didn't feel like I was losing too much. It hurts. I mean, it's a gun line. It hurts, but I still felt like I was able to pretty reliably like remove the things that I wanted to remove. Definitely not a perfect matchup for Animag. It's not like I'm saying like, hey, Animag is the answer for Crucible Guard, because it's not. It's a hard list to play into, and I don't think either my opponent or I played a perfect game by any means. But it was definitely interesting. I'm definitely casting Carnage a lot. Like I do like, that was one of my big takeaways. I like Carnage on Animag. It was almost always helpful. It was making the birds hit reliable. I liked what the birds were doing. And in general, I was noticing that the Bond of Gristle and Bone did good things on the Chosen. Like, and And there's a surprisingly weird amount of things where at one point they had ambushed Hutchuck, and he quaked down a chosen, but then couldn't shoot it with anything else afterwards.
Yeah, because of feign death.
Yeah.
Um, you know, when I play Animag into Silvestro, especially if they're playing like the double rareless list, the one thing I find really clutch in that matchup is her feat. Because sometimes you lose half or more of your army on the advance, and you're like, man, this is gonna be rough. And then 3 chosen kill 2 rareless, and you're like, I feel better now. Um, and so
That seems like a 3 chosen.
yeah, I'm exaggerating a little,
Yeah.
but when you stack on strength buffs from the Blightbringer and the feet and them charging in, they do a surprising amount of damage.
Oh yeah.
Rotwings are the same way, especially when you're getting damage on Ralis. It's got a lot of boxes, and like 5 Rotwings are just like, nope, that's a dead battle engine. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the battle engine seemed to be constantly concerned with GoLab murdering them, and uh, it kept them from pressuring the zone. Basically, it's like if you put them in the zone to contest, they're gonna die or can die, like very reasonably. Even GoLab just being able to have access to Dark Shroud
Hmm.
will put a railless down, no problem. Um, and I think that was the thing that like they couldn't. The railless interceptors could shoot or bully the zone, not really both. And
Hmm.
since they elected to keep shooting, it was allowing me to keep scenario pressure on where I had time. I could kill the key things that I needed to kill and keep clearing zones. But again, it was clearly not the perfect situation for Animag. And so it was really weird. Like, I haven't been running into the guns as often. And now that I'm trying Animag, then I get the guns. And I'm like, part of what made me consider playing her was that all of the things that I was going into that are feeling very bulky, and they had a little bit of, say like Infernals, for instance, being something where you're like, man, Animag will like start dropping heavies with like 3 Rotwings.
Hmm.
Right? Like,
Go ahead.
oh, I was just thinking, like, if you have Animag's feet up, like 3 rot wings or something could probably drop a heavy under the right circumstances and just like
Hmm.
generate some really positive trades. Um, that was part of my thought process.
I had GoLab and a minimum unit of raw wings take a prime axiom off the table the other day, so I totally feel it.
Yeah.
Um, so speaking of this matchup in particular, I think it's really clutch that you chose to go first as well. So against gun lines, when you have a melee-oriented army, I personally like to go second every time except for this. This is the one time you have to go first. Because if you go second, they go first and run forward. Then you go second and run forward. Then they advance and shoot you, and then you advance and get shot again. But if you go first, you run forward, then they run forward, then you run up into really good cover positions and behind houses and like into places that threaten the zones, and then they have to choose whether they shoot or move into the zone. So going second against a gun line can just be an absolute dick punch. Getting to go first against the reroll, epic.
Yeah, and it was definitely when I looked down at the table, and even though I'd won the roll, I'm like, do I want to go second? I'm like, this list is really fast, and I was looking at the terrain, and I felt like it was set up in such a way that I felt like I was going to be able to get some reasonable defensive bonuses either way.
Mm-hmm.
And they specifically wanted to avoid. There was a house on my side, and I think they wanted to specifically avoid having to deal with that house with their 2, huge bases as
Mm-hmm.
well. And that's part of my advantage, not playing things like Blightbringer or Battle Engines in any of my lists. Is my list ends up being very versatile and able to handle terrain in a lot of situations. So that part
Mm-hmm.
I will say I liked. Um, so then round 2, I end up playing against someone rocking Circle. And they're clearly trying to practice their Tharn list because they have Balder 1 Tharn and Iona Tharn.
Mm.
And so I'm like, I'm definitely getting Tharn. Um, and potentially looking at where we were at scenario wise, this was the scenario where you have the long zone in the middle and then the 2 circles.
Yeah.
So uh again, not necessarily the perfect situation for Thags, but also not necessarily the perfect situation for Animag, because I know that I'm facing double units of Tharn that will just murder all the birds. And the birds are particularly rough into Tharn because they're almost never wounded. You don't like auto point, like, you don't get one damage on Tharn, they heal it. So the only time that you really like is if you kill them and then they tough and then they don't heal, they can't heal back four. So Tharn, it's really hard to get finisher on them. And so in particular, the Rotwings can be a little rough into that matchup. So I'm like, you know what? I promised myself I would get both lists on the table one way or the other. And so let's just do it right now and let's play Thags. And I felt like the fact that I had decided to put the Chosen in that list is what made this possible. If it was not for the Chosen, I think this would have been totally unplayable, and I would have almost been forced to play Animag into it because I just couldn't have dropped it into this scenario with the two circular zones. I don't think I would have had enough pressure because there's no way I can protect both Hellmouth units.
Yeah.
And so even though they can sit in there and potentially control those, they're not going to last against that. Like, they're going to get charged. Like, if they're in the zone, they're going to get charged. So, this one, I forget who won the role. Yeah, I'm really not sure who ended up going first in this particular matchup. I think I ended up going first. I may have won the role again and just been like, screw it, let's go first. And really what I ended up doing is, again, I wanted to get stuff off the table, threaten and try to like keep him from being able to strike the opposite side of the zone right away. So I kind of I'd put Hellmouse in each of the circular zones. Thagrosh and Golab were kind of trying to be scary up the middle. And I had Seraph also kind of middle-wise. And so on my left zone, I had a Scythian going over there and Golab kind of leaning that direction a little bit. And then Thagrosh kind of leaning a little bit more to the right. And then the Chosen and a Scythian kind of going into that zone. He had the Tharn girls from back in the day that you barely ever see, the spear chucking, now the blood trackers. So he was running blood trackers and double Tharn and a couple heavies, kind of and the well. So he did come in not too aggressively. But what ended up happening as the game was dragging on is one of the key moments. He kind of exposed Bridget and Call a little early. So I saw a good opportunity where I felt like I didn't think Thags' feat was going to do a huge amount here, but I knew the Scythian was going to be able to walk up and kill both of them because of Murderous and having grievous wounds and then back up. My problem on that side is I also had Golab kill 2 Ravagers, and that triggered Vengeance. And I probably should not have had Golab do that. Maybe I shouldn't even have feeded, and I should have just let Golab kill Bridget and Call and back up. That probably would have been the safest play. But I felt like I was feeling the pressure. There was a lot of models on the table, and I wanted to get some models off the table, and there was no feed up, and I just wanted things off the table. But thankfully, Thagrosh, he always had the same threat range, so it really wasn't often where I'm like, hey, you also have to respect Thags', because he was respecting the 13 inches from Golab. So I was like, oh, Thagrosh doesn't really have to worry about things. But the middle stayed very clear. There was very little going into the middle of the board because Golab and Thags just kind of like owned that area. And it's like, if you were coming in there, you were going to die. And the Chosen ended up going in a little heavier in the middle, killing off a lot of blood trackers. I focused on them, did not want to trigger Vengeance on the right side, and I got his Tharn Wolf Rider solo with one of the Chosen. I'm like, that dude's gonna die. Chosen murder things. Sadly, I was gonna kill like 2 more blood trackers, and I missed the 5 or 6 with the War Chiefs +1 to impact attack a blood tracker. I was like, oh, ouch. Sad. Yeah, I mean, their defense 14, right? And I was effectively mat 8. So I guess I needed a 6. But, and I killed one and missed the other. It happens, but I was impact attacking 2 on that particular charge. And if I'd killed both of them, then I get to go in and kill another one. So it was 2 more that would have died. But um, now what happened here is where things got interesting, because the way he ended up being able to vengeance and clear off the tentacle jam that was keeping uh the Tharn at bay. So now I'm going to take a
Tentacle
full.
jam.
So now I know my Scythian and my Hellmouth are both plenty in charge range of um, some damn Tharn. And so I'm like, I'm losing one or both. But with where the Hermit was positioned, so what ended up happening is he basically had 5 Tharn to charge with, and he could put 2 on the Hellmouth and 3 on the Scythian, or 3 on the Hellmouth, 2 on the Scythian, and he ends up putting 2 on the Scythian. So what I ended up doing is I ended up blowing the Mad Visions to eat one of the charge attacks and save the Scythian. Because the Scythian now only took 1 charge and overall 3 bot attacks that were non-boosted. And so I lost the Hellmouth, but either way, like, if I could have saved either one. And so I was thinking right there, the Hellmouth saves a different important, like, or the Hermit is able to protect a very key thing that one way or another, one of them was going to live. Now, the Scythian still almost died and was on like 2 boxes. So things could have very easily not gone his way. But it was very interesting how that role was going to be, and like having him near Thags also like made me feel like I had another transfer. Like there was just a lot of things about that that I was happy with how that was playing out. So now all of a sudden I'm having the Scythian that was going to live and get healed and gonna probably kill a bunch of Tharn. But on the other side, obviously I did not trigger Vengeance. It didn't hurt quite as bad, but I'm still leaking Chosen, but I kept my Scythian alive over there. I did notice as things were getting murdered, because they were killing Chosen or like other large base things like the Hellmouth, it was constantly leaving good landing zones for the Scythian or Golab. Like, so that I liked. It was like, oh, you're going to cluster around this thing and try to murder it. Great, you're leaving a perfect landing zone for me to murder all of those things in retribution. Which got me thinking the Scythians may be even better when you have something like, so say like a Nerif does work, kills some things, sprints back to a location, and then when they come forward and like actually kill that Nerif, then it leaves a perfect spot for like a Scythian to come in and kill whatever whatever is risked in that. So it might be a good kind of multi-layered threat, like where you have a Nerif and a Scythian going into each zone potentially, and you try to keep the Scythian a little bit further back to like counter strike whatever comes in at the Nerif.
Interesting.
But the way that ended up playing out is he still took a lot of time kind of preparing the charges and like figuring out how far he wanted to go. So he ended up being pretty low on time. And he just, I did take a picture. I wanted to see where I was at control points wise in that game. I ended up just kind of seizing. He just never scored points. So even though he was running low on time, it didn't end up being where he was going to clock. It just ended up in a point where I was going to I kept killing things that were going into the zones. And so the right zone, by the time that the Chosen and the Scythian and stuff were all falling apart and dying, he was gaining control of that zone, but not fast enough because the Hellmouth sat in the back, so he wasn't scoring. And so even though I had gained control of the left side, because there was only one unit going over there, and he had gotten the Hellmouth, but Fags was able to move over there. He killed some stuff and like sprinted in the right location. And so he's now controlling that zone, and I'd already killed his objective, and I was clearing out things in the middle, but they had to respect Golab and Thag's threat enough that I kind of kept control of that long enough that even by the time my right zone was falling, he just still didn't have any points, so I went up 5-0. Um,
Man, I feel like this was a good matchup no matter what you chose.
it
So
was
if
tough. I felt like they still could have gone really bad for me at a lot of different points.
if he chooses Balder, both your lists have flying outs for his feet. If he chooses Iona, both your lists can attrition the same way as his, and maybe even arguably better with the Ex's feet because you have the backup option as well as the advance option. And Animag can kill the world and they get no healing on her feet turn. And your version also has Golab in there. You have two Scythians with Murderous. Like, and I think the way that list plays already, right? You played Thags 2, and you're already in a position where you're going the long attrition game with the Tharn. So you have advantages against their healing, you have advantages against their troops, and now the one thing that tend to be like the tilting point, having the Hermit and saying, okay, I can now negate a really important attack, keep a really important piece alive, and maybe make the trade go worse for them, puts you in a position to where you can take that to the end. I really I like that matchup. So
Yeah, I guess one of the things I hadn't thought about when I was picking lists was the fact that the Rotwings would do better against the Tharn when they have access to Grievous Wounds,
mhm.
right? Like it's easier to like charge two in, like one damages it but doesn't kill it, but at least gets a point or two in. It can't heal, so then the second one has finisher and is just like, whoop, get off my table.
And with
Um,
feet, they do respectable damage, man. Like
oh
they can.
yeah, just at a point where you've got something, Carnage. Even if you don't put a strength buff on them, just putting them from 9 to a charging 11,
Mhm.
like just a POW 11 versus armor 18, dice
Mhm.
-7. That's very reasonable. That's not like where you're killing heavy targets, but that's enough where you can pretty reliably get in that first point and to make sure the second one can finish it off. Uh,
Definitely.
so um, overall, I mean, maybe Animag would have been a better matchup, especially considering the scenario. Um, but it was really interesting playing Fags. It's also not a. It was a situation where I really wanted Thags to be murdering stuff and sprinting away, but with my beast loadout, I kept wanting Manifest Destiny. I will totally admit, Manifest Destiny Murderous Scythians didn't
So
work.
good. So good.
Um,
Additional die, additional dry, drop the lowest. Yeah.
like, and like just having Thresher built in as opposed to like having to like hit two chain
Chain attack.
attacks.
Yeah.
Um, that was a nice change of pace, but still, them only backing up 5 inches from the feet, like I didn't feel like I was getting a lot of great work with the feet. In that game, I ended up using the Seraph to just go kill the objective. I'm like, I've damaged it already. Like I hit it with something. Oh, I think I had like sprayed it or something with Ags and gotten some points on it. And I'm like, I think Seraph can probably finish this off. And I was willing to like lose the Seraph, I think, at that point in the game. But it was gonna eat attacks that I didn't want going into other more important things. And I always like try not to keep the Seraph around late game. That's not one of the pieces. Was as models are leaving the table, I want the Seraph to go at a certain point.
Yeah. In lieu of something else going rather.
Yes.
Because you don't want it to just go trivially. But
Right.
in a game of trading pieces, the Seraph's still only 14 points.
And
So
14 points for 27 boxes.
yeah,
That's
definitely.
still a lot.
There's still no
Um,
knockdown boxes too. I mean, like
yeah, for sure.
high defense, reasonable to kill, heavy boxes.
Yeah. So that was interesting. Again, it wasn't a situation where I really felt like the list could do what I really wanted it to do. I'm so worried I didn't have enough threats in there. Like I think having the double Scythian and having the Chosen, something needed to get diversified in there. And I needed to end up with another heavy or a unit of Rotwings or something. Something needed to. There was a lot of little extras in this list compared to my other lists. I lost one Forsaken kind of unfortunately trivially. Like all I did was remove like one Fury, and then I had it a little far forward, and a drift from the well ended up killing it. Or no, it wasn't a
Boo!
drift from the well. It was there the one of the Tharn that I think it killed either a tentacle or it killed the Hellmouth, and the way that it was able to um, overtake, he ended up getting a little farther than I expected and got to the Forsaken and like popped it, and I was like, well, that sucked.
I've been
Um,
there.
so I'm not sure even with that particular list design that I need both Forsaken. So maybe that's one of the spots where I can tighten up some points or something because you just, but maybe in a totally different matchup, like I'd have to play it more. But I did feel like I needed more threats, and the list still. I wanted people to have to spend more attacks. So I think maybe finding a way to work in a Neref or something. I don't know exactly what it should be. Maybe, I mean, how maybe you just play it without Forsaken and you do like drop 2 Forsaken and one of the Scythians and you get 2 Nerefs in there. Like that that ups its amount of boxes pretty considerably and puts more threats in there.
Have you considered dropping the Seraph? As much as I like it, it's still a 14-point support package.
The thing is, I've consistently found that the Seraph. So it's hard for me because back in Mark II, I found like I was doing better as I dropped the Seraph from my lists. But now I've been finding I really like what the Seraph does. A lot of the time, Apparition makes it surprisingly threaten further than you expect because it's almost always moving 2 inches. So I found I can. It's really easy for it to like be behind a forest and then apparition into the forest and be able to charge to wherever it needs to go. It doesn't hit particularly hard, but I find it almost always scalpels out key things for me and ends up being something where I'm pretty happy with how it overall, not just in what Slipstream buys me, but how I'm able to play it with casters like Fags and Animag and Veil that can still like buff up its effectiveness a bit. That it always feels to be worth the 14 points for me. Like that's how it's felt in the list that I've been playing. Now, not to say that a nerf wouldn't necessarily do good things too, but it's not a piece where I've been feeling like it's held me back at all in the list.
Fair enough.
Um,
Well, you got one more matchup to talk about.
this is true. Going into the last round, I get Adam, one of the WTC player, local, awesome dude. He played Circle at WTC, but he's been practicing Infernals. And he had Agathon and Sloan. And we were in the championship belt, where it's just like the circle in the middle and those 2 long zones on the end. He wins the roll and is going first. I'm fine with second in this case because it does allow me, like after he's set up his stuff, I end up dropping my Hellmouse in the absolute edge of both of the rectangular zones. So they're like on the edge of the table, just barely into the zone. And at least with where he has positioned his hunters, he's not really able to shoot them round 1, at least. And that's fine because I'm like, I know there's going to be a bunch of shit that can get shot round 2. I try to keep the birds back this time. He doesn't have very many Minutemen, and I'd rather be able to like clear them as opposed to like losing a bunch of birds trivially to the flak fields. But it's really weird when we go into his top of 2 after I've run stuff forward. He doesn't have as many shots, and I've put 2 Chosen in front of Animag. She's behind a wall and camping 5. So even though he can probably get just about everything in that vicinity, being behind a wall, he's probably going to miss half of his shots. And so the feat kind of just like nullifies the high defense. So just like everything's going to hit her once, but she's got 5 transfers. He's going to have to like clear out the Chosen in front or at least knock one down to get some of those shots. And in the end, without trying to like do all of the hardcore math, he's like, this is probably 50-50.
That's rough.
Yeah, but I was like trying to make it complicated enough. And, if you miss too many key attacks at the beginning, that's one of those things that if he goes for it, he could get very, very little done. Or he might kill all of my beasts and almost kill Animag, and, who knows. But I still felt like I had to pressure the table some. He elected to end up not feeding and did not end up having as great of a turn as he wanted. Because his first shots trying to take down a Chosen ends up leaving a key chosen knocked down in the zone. And he's like, well, that's bad. I can't shoot that chosen anymore because of feigned death. And I had specifically kept my chosen out of range of Eilish, so he could not remove he could not remove the buff. And um, what ended up happening here was so he focused. He was like, I can get some shots on Amek. Unfortunately, Amek was a little further forward, and I wasn't used to Rise mattering. Like most of the time, everything dies, but it's a little bit different with Animag because if something gets toughed, it's probably living. And so he was able to kill Amek, and he got one chosen out of the other unit. So really, all I ended up losing on that top of two was two chosen and Amek. Now, I didn't get him to blow his feet, but I felt pretty reasonable about this because now I'm going to start scoring points. He did have enough stuff towing the zone in the middle that I wasn't going to be able to clear that, but I was able to score 2 points, taking control of. I think I was able to kill his objective, and so I ended up scoring 3 points. But the next turn, he popped his feet. Now he starts doing more considerable work. Lots of stuff starts leaving the table. And we end up in this grindy thing where he's getting low on time. He's had to take a lot of attacks. I got to make it. I'm trying to make my tough rolls as fast as I can. But he's running low on time. And I hit some really rough turns where I'm not making tough checks. And I'm rolling pretty low on damage with both a Seraph and Golab. And I get this stressful turn where even though the Seraph dies, I have 4 Fury on Golab and 1 on the Harrier, and I can only pull off 3. So both of them frenzy, or risk frenzy. Harrier indeed frenzies, and we have to check he's actually knocked down. He got pushed out of the zone, which allowed him to score a point. I was like, that was a key Thunderbolt. But we're like, wait a minute, so what happens with the Harrier? I didn't even realize that in the current rules, when you frenzy, you shake everything. And that had not come up for me before. So it was knocked down, but he still shook, and so he charged the closest thing, but did nothing because he was pretty hurt up. But thankfully, Golab did not frenzy. I needed a 7 or lower to not frenzy. So I had like a 58% chance to not frenzy. It was going to be pretty important because I think if I frenzy that turn, the game is going to go out of control real fast. But I'm able to keep the scenario pressure on. But he's able to start clearing out the things in the right zone and actually start scoring it. So the score is staying pretty heavy, like staying pretty tight. And I finally decide to get Animag up. And this was this was definitely the thing that ended up losing me the game. Animag moves up, and I buy a few attacks to get 3 damage into his Hermit, who's on the flag. And I wanted to kind of take control of things in the middle. And the problem is, I was realizing at that point that Golab didn't actually have that many boxes left. And I elected to camp 3, not really factoring in that there's no way I could transfer 3 attacks. Like, they would have to be pretty light attacks for me to transfer them and not kill Golab. I just didn't have the other beasts left. So, should have put Bond on myself at that point and only camped 1. But so he's got like 2 minutes left, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna go pretty quick, trying to kill Animak. And basically on the last attack that he could fully resolve, he kills her to the point.
So if you had Bond, you'd have been fine.
If I'd had Bond, Golab would have had 2 health and not died perfectly to the transfer. And he had taken 2 or 3 attacks into her, so she would have had like 4 to 6 more health, and he would have definitely had to make another attack, which maybe he rolls fast enough.
You bring up a very interesting point, though. This has come up a lot for me as an Animag player. Is at what point in the game do you switch Bond from your units to Animag? And it is really important to recognize that turn, because if you don't, you get fucking killed. Because the game with Animag, especially a lot in my experience, and we've talked about this on a number of our podcasts, even on my Phoenix Open recap, where it's like, oh, I hit your army really hard, I kill most of it, you go for an assassination on Animag. and knowing to put that on you is key. And you also, I mean, you had Go Labs, you had Swarm as well.
Yes. Does not matter a whole lot against Sloan
No,
when
no.
everything has guided fire. Like, they're all getting boosted to hit anyway. But I've now played into Sloan multiple times, and I don't think that matchup is as bad for Legion as people often act like it is. And
Mm.
when you're playing double chosen, double Rotwings, it's a lot of attacks to make. It's a lot of really calculated position, and they don't have very many things that can just trivially like be in a zone. Like it all dies. Sloan is definitely stronger, I think, in Infernals because you the the damn hunters are getting boosted damage on both shots now instead of just one without Sloan having to allocate anything. And so that's rough. Like that means the feet shot, there's a whole nother like 5 or 6 boosted damage shots.
Yeah.
So it's tough. But that was one that I think he was so low on time that I think if I had just kept Animag safe. The problem was I think I had to move her out from behind the wall to catch the key things to be able to clear that zone again, to catch them in Carnage. And the problem is with her not being very fast, I couldn't transition her well from it's kind of hard to imagine, but there's like this forest or this wall that she's hiding behind, and she kind of needs to get behind this forest, but she doesn't move fast enough. So there's a spot like once she's behind that wall, she couldn't ever move to behind the forest. Oh God. I didn't even think about it until now. I should have just used one of the Fury and sprinted. Huh. Like I could have bought one more attack, finished off the Hermit, spent one and sprinted and been back behind that wall.
Helpful.
That also, yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I was a little worried that if I didn't try to deal with the Hermit where it was at, that things were going to go badly for me, and like being able to give -2 armor to her. It was one of the few things that could potentially like she had some fury to spend one way or another. And I will say I feeded a turn late. I kind of the first turn that I'm attacking stuff, there really wasn't that much to attack, so it wasn't justified. The next turn, it actually would have mattered, and I didn't use it, and so there was some key attacks that I missed, or like that didn't kill, or it took a little bit more effort than it should. And that's part of why I ended up building up too much fury. But I don't know. It was interesting. I'm not the hard part about after all of it is, I went 2-1. My only loss was in a really close game that I got assassinated that I could have probably easily finished off if, I just made it 1 or 2 decisions at the end, but I just wasn't sure what that end game was going to look like since he was taking control of the right zone. I didn't want it to actually. I was worried that it could hit turn 7 and he might stay ahead of me on scenario. But he admitted that he didn't think he had the time to actually resolve things well enough to like keep it at that point with how little time he had. But I don't know. The hardest part is I'm not sure I legitimately like either of these lists.
That's fair.
Which is weird. Like after, my first big experiment, well, like multiple of my big experiments, like I bring my Callus 1 list with the double Nerf and Golab. I'm like, I love this thing. This is awesome. And then I'm like, I'm going to play my Veil list. And I loved that. And this is kind of the first time where I've like brought some stuff out to a tournament and I have not felt great about it afterwards. I think I could have easily lost control of either of my first 2 games.
Okay. Well, I think that gives us an opportunity for growth moving forward because, like you said, you've had experiences with both of those lists where you've been like, nailed it, move on. And now you finally hit something where you're like, this is going to take some work. I might have to roll up my sleeves and get in some more games to really work it out. And I think that's good for you. You need that.
Yeah. And that's like, as we said in the last podcast, we want to try things. And that's why I'm putting Scythians on the table. I'm trying some other casters. I'm seeing what they what they do and whether they have the right things.
Mm,
But kind of in the way that we were always like, why am I not playing Animag? I
mm.
immediately felt like, say, especially when I'm playing Thagrosh, I'm like, why am I not playing Veil 1?
Yeah,
Yeah, like, yes, he's a big boy, but it's really hard to, like, it's hard for him to do work and manifest destiny.
it's true. That's always the line you have to toe with tags.
Yeah, and it's just really hard for him to actually do something, try to kill stuff, and then sprint back and cast Manifest Destiny. So it's just hard to fundamentally make that part work.
Well, and I
So
think that was your question going into this, right? Because you had
yeah,
originally said, I think that the Axis feat is potentially better into X because of this. I want to try it out. But I think that Veiled runs the list better. So you go into it and you try it out, and you're like, okay. So there are some things, like we were pointing out earlier, that Thagrosh may potentially fill a similar role as Veil 1 against gun lines because you can run the army. The
yeah,
difference is that with Thags, his army is tied to his control area, which means he has to be a lot closer to the front line if you're going to use that tactic. Where with Vale, she can just be like, all right, I move up, I feed all my rot wings into your army. I don't have to be there. Like, that's a big difference. It's a huge difference in play. And so I think that and some of the other key differences that you and I have talked about, and we don't need to hit again, show you that maybe you should be playing Veil at the LCQ instead of Thags. You can just put that to bed and be like, you know what, Thags, go back on the show.
I will say that I'm considering putting a Scythian in with her.
Hey, all right, that's a progress.
Like potentially drop the Harrier, like work in a Scythian, like maybe drop one unit of the birds and like have another. It gives me some more boxes. It gives me a different potential anchor piece that still has access to grievous wounds. Like it
Hmm.
expands her ability to deal with grievous wounds. It's a really interesting piece to say against Tharn with like Dark Sentinel. Like if you use Dark Sentinel against Tharn, it's actually better than taking the charge, right? So if you have, if they charge in the first one and like there's multiple that also are going to get to charge in on it, and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to Dark Sentinel, you can take a free strike. They don't get the brutal charge bonus.
Nice.
So you actually save 2 damage that way, like walking away from it and now being too far away. And yeah, it's obviously fags can anchor things, but again, I'm just not finding games come down to that attrition. Like, there's still a fair amount left.
I think it also has a lot more to do with, and I may correct me if I'm wrong, but you are considerably more of a finesse player than you are a like beatdown player. You're not a
This is
browbeater.
100% true. Yeah,
You you like the finesse casters and you like that very fine playstyle. And even when we in the premium podcast after this, we talk about some of your favorite models, and several of the models you mentioned because of the way they play, that they're dynamic, that they have
yeah,
multiple layers and things like that. And so I think that Veil fits your personal playstyle better than Thags does. Well, personally, me, like I might like Thags because I like to play those midline casters that do lots of work and surround them with other working models. But fundamentally, I like your Veil list better because it's all the troops.
yeah. You like Chosen, and there's just something like honestly, I think you should potentially try both Veil One and Tags too.
I will
Uh,
definitely try Veil 1. She's really high on my list right now.
and there's just something it's really hard. Like with the Chosen, you're always trying to weigh whether or not to send them all the way in, right? Because you just don't want to end up losing them, and you've got to like,
Hmm.
position them after the reposition. And but it's so nice for me, like, okay, I want to clear this zone. The Chosen are going to go all in, murder a bunch of stuff, and then they're going to back up 10 inches. Like
Amazing.
that's so good. Like being able to send them in and be able to like reset them for a whole nother charge, and then like other things end up flying over the top of them and jam things up, so they get to do their thing again, is just so good. Now, mind you, it's not as good against guns because there's no armor buff in the Veil list.
Yeah. Well, and I may run a Blightbringer with her just for the sake of I want to run the armor buff with her. Um, and it's a potential. I mean, like it doesn't have to move, but that Dark Sentinel punch, beef.
Oh yeah,
Um,
crit poison too. Yeah,
but
it was a thought that across my mind. I don't want to like move past that thought
Yeah.
too quickly because it's something that I was thinking about, and I did build a list where I'm like, well, maybe that other beast package for her is the Blightbringer, and it actually increases her survivability. Giving her +2 armor helps a lot too, so it doesn't just help the troops.
And the Blightbringer not moving is not a big deal because she's probably going to be tucked in its ass anyways.
Yes, and so it improving her survivability, but it does the negative part of what it does for the list is it does put like one piece that they can focus on and really like drop the effectiveness of the list, which otherwise it's one of the advantages of playing it is it's really hard to like pick. You can't really dissect key pieces from it. Like it's got a lot of diverse threats and it just eats up a lot of attacks. Where Blightbringer is a really consistent way of getting stuff off the table on a time effective focused way. And there's nothing you can stop them from doing that.
You know, one of the things I really like about the concept, and I haven't played it, and you're much more of a master at it than I am, is there are two things about this list that I think really make it sing, and I think the Blightbringer will really add to that. The first is that normally when I play Chosen, I like double Chosen, and I double stack them so I can have multiple waves of Chosen. I think Cav in general are best in waves, and so this allows you to take those 2 unit of Chosen and act like 4 unit of Chosen, because now you can use them in multiple waves. Well, with the Blightbringer, he can sit back and shoot your opponent. They can cross the distance and charge and beat that thing down in the aura, and then back up and be back in his armor aura farther away. And he can even contribute to 2 potential battle zones where you need auras for armor and 2 locations. You can be like, all right, so Blightbringer moves up, drops his aura on these guys. I shoot my tentacle over there so that I have the aura for them to back up into. Both of these units charge in and then back up into the armor auras. Now shoot me.
But
Go ahead.
so as much as I conceptually like the idea, if you're going to pair this with your Animag list, I think the Veil list may actually need a little bit more diverse beast package.
That's
Because you're
fair.
going to say, like, in that exact scenario that I was talking about, you're going to get screwed into both of those scenarios. Like, if
Yeah.
you try to play either of those lists into the championship belt, you're not going to be able to put any beasts in those zones. You're not scoring points.
That's a very valid point. I would probably have to go with a different beast package for that reason.
Yeah.
But it's a lot to consider and something, maybe I don't have to play Animag. Who knows?
No, I think I think if you want to give there's 2 thoughts here, right? If you're gonna try Veil 1, you either have to just not bring Animag to force yourself to play Veil 1,
This is
or
true.
you have to pair it specifically with Animag because you don't want to walk away feeling like, well, I didn't have Animag, that is why I did poorly, and then blame Veil for that. Right? So you have these kind of
You're like, I don't want you to have a negative play experience with my baby.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not to say that we necessarily need to be playing the exact same thing, but it would be interesting to hear your feedback, and there may be some directions that you could take the list. I struggled to put more beast with her and feel like that's the right call because I really loved what the units have done for her. But maybe the right call isn't having the Rotwings in there. Maybe it's better to have a couple of Nerfs or something.
Yeah, I'll probably run Warmongers. I think they would be an interesting sprinting package, essentially, with her feet to go in, murder stuff, and then back up.
I mean, I did like Warmongers with her, and the one of the original problems where we saw people dropping the hills and treating them as rubble went away at Mox. And so I think it may be something that as soon as people try it, they're like, this is a bad idea. Everybody thinks it's hills.
Yeah, I'm still seeing a fair share of rubble in lieu of just needing more terrain and it being an easy thing to put down. But I think that players are essentially going. I think we need to see less of the rubble everywhere. But you know what I've seen more of? So there, when we rolled into Mark II, and then we used to like see the one house or the one forest right in the middle of the table. Now I'm coming up on tables that have like 2 houses, or a building and a house, or like 2 forests, a house, and a building, and you're like. There's a lot more that flying gets around than I
Yes.
ever thought of before. And it makes me even consider casters like Absolonia and go, a caster with flight can take advantage of these defensive terrain features even better now.
Like Thagrosh 2?
Like Absolonia and Tagros too, yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, anyways, I think that's all interesting. I think you had
Yeah.
a great experience here, and I'm excited to see where you build on it.
Yeah, I think I still want. I have some more beast heavy lists that I want to experiment with, but I think I would prefer to try. I have an Absalonia one list that has a pretty diverse beast package. Um, that I think I would prefer to try next. I thought Thagrosh I might like a little bit better because of his larger control area, but I think what Absalonia does might be a touch better.
Okay.
Refuge. But anyway, um, it's been interesting. Like I said, this is follow up to the last episode where trying to explore, try new things. It's not always going to work, but it's going to teach important things, and you don't always know what you're going to discover. So,
Before we wrap up, I got a few shout outs if you don't mind.
oh, shout away.
So my first shout out is Chris Zaborowski. So in our premium episode of Blight Makes Right, if you go and listen to it, there's one player in my meta, and I cannot remember his name for the life of me. And I'm sitting there going, "Why can't I remember his name?" Because he's awesome. He's basically our like live-in press ganger, and one of my new favorite people to play around and with. And I think that he's a very positive influence in our community. And I couldn't remember his name. So now, if he's listening to this and then he goes into the premium cast, my apologies. Mad
Yeah.
love to you, man. Second shout out, Field of Fire, my other podcast on Lina site. I want to give shout outs to because we're doing some interesting things. Our next episode, we're going to do a specific focus on a theme throughout my Menoth faction. So we're talking about paladins. And so we talk about fluff, we talk about battles within the game, we talk about tactics and lists and all kinds of interesting things. And so it's something very different than I had ever done before. And then we're also going to be doing some fan fiction radio dramas. So I
Interesting.
am, and I'd be absolutely interested to have you on, Charles. Going to write some fan fiction based around a journeyman warcaster, and Trevor's going to write one based around a journeyman warcaster, and they're going to meet up somewhere in Oblivion, become unlikely allies, and then through this unlikely allyship, the story will develop. And then in theory, depending on how, because it's hard, give or take, not knowing who's going to be a good radio personality, we're going to press gang some other voices into our radio drama to be cameo characters. So maybe we bring Charles on to cameo as Thagrosh or Callus.
Not sure I
And
can do the voice of Thagrosh. I mean, I could probably emulate like Callus voice better. What would Callus sound like? I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about this.
I'm sure if you stretch, you could.
I'm, I don't know. Maybe you get all Megatron on us. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lack of fluff, and I've written my fair share of fanfic, and I create my own around my own army sometimes. And I thought this would be really fun. Maybe I should just read the fluff on camera or like on the microphone. And then I thought, nah, maybe Privateer Press doesn't want me just reading their fluff. And then I thought, well, what if I just write my own about the Warcasters? Then I thought, well, let's not like just appropriate their characters. Maybe I'll just make my own inside their own, and it'll be like if you ever listen to any of like the D&D dramas or anything like that of like live games of it's going to be like that. So there's going to be the adventure within it. And I listen to a lot of the audiobooks. I think Audible is amazing. The Skull Island books are awesome. I've listened to a lot of them, and I think that I could achieve not necessarily the same level of quality because I can't do all the voices, but I think with enough voice actors, I could achieve a similar level of quality on short episodes. So we could do like a 30-minute episode of where this guy has an excursion and uses his new warjack, and like my wife can play the female voice in it, and Trevor can play the gruff sergeant, and you can play the new recruit, and who knows? I think there's a lot of room for interesting stuff. So
Yeah, that's
I'm
not
going to
really
be
something that's
trying.
done in the War Machine community, so that's really interesting.
I came up with it today, and I sent Trevor a message, and I said, "Hey, Trevor, you are a fluff guru." It was basically his claim to fame, is that if it's written, he's read it and can probably quote it when it comes to the War Machine fluff. And so um, he will also help be my consultant on the Iron Kingdoms, because while I may be well versed in a lot of the characters and lore, he can tell you like specifically what kind of packs the donkeys will use if they're being led by Signar, and you're like, what?
Say what? All right. Cool. Also, obviously, we mentioned the Patreon a couple of times in this episode. The way it's set up is you can either put in basically $1 per release or $2 per release. You get access to the extra Patreon episodes, which will either be like we build a list live on the show, like this is the theme, this is the caster, let's build it. And so you can kind of go through our building process and see what you pick up from us, and we're going to take requests and stuff from the listeners. And then we have Q&A episodes. We're going to take questions from the listeners, ask it to each other, also from other leaders and whatnot in the community, getting some of their questions as well. So we're excited to have a way to give back to you guys who want to contribute something a little extra. But Emanuel, it has been fun chatting with you again. Thanks for... I know I probably do not play Animag as well as you do. So I'm sure at times you should have done this. If you've been watching me, you've probably been like, stop fucking up, Charles.
You know, it just takes practice. I was there once. I played a lot of Animag, and I only got better after a lot of games and positioning and losses and learning it. So that's just the nature of the beast. But speaking of the nature of the beast, Charles, talk us out.
All right. It's the end. You know what that means. Lights out.